Today we are continuing our series on Old Testament characters, and we're looking today at Jonathan and David. Jonathan and David had this remarkable friendship, and they were at a time in the history of God's people when there was a king on the throne, King Saul, and he had been appointed by God, but he had, as so often happens with human rulers, lost his way, and God had anointed David, a shepherd boy, to be the next king of Israel, even though not many people knew it. And then David wins this great victory, and he becomes friends with Jonathan. And it's remarkable, really, because there were so many factors pushing them apart. Jonathan, who was the son of the king and expected to become the next king, and David, who was anointed by God to be the next king. But in the midst of that, they forged this great friendship. So we're going to look now at a couple of quick passages from the lives of David and Jonathan, which gives you a taste of their friendship. So firstly, 1 Samuel 18 on page 291. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's home. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. And then the story continues. After Saul has turned against David, feeling threatened by him, they have this conversation in 1 Samuel 20. Then Jonathan said to David, "By the Lord, the God of Israel, I will surely sound out my father by this time, the day after tomorrow. If he's favorably disposed towards you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father, but show me unfailing kindness like that of the Lord as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord call David's enemies to account." And Jonathan made David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. And then this as they part from verse 42. From verse 41, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" My talk today is called 4 Keys to Great Friendships. And we see 4 keys in the life of this friendship between Jonathan and David. And friendship is so important. Friendship has the capacity to transform your life. Even though we have so many apparent technological aids to friendship in our generation, it doesn't feel like they've made it easier for people to form great, lifelong friendships. And then there are external factors like work pressures, maybe coming in and out of paid employment, changing jobs, trying to prove yourself in the workplace, all the effort and time that requires, or the transience of modern life, moving maybe from job to job, from city to city, even from continent to continent. All those, the sheer busyness of life, it all seems to make it harder for people to form great friendships. But life-defining friendships are so important. You are made for friendship. Your desire for friendship, the loneliness we sometimes feel, that sense of loss when we maybe lose a friend, those aren't signs of your imperfection, but of your perfection. They're actually the imprint of a relational God on your life. You are made for friendship. And finding, forging, and keeping great friendships is one of the most important skills in life. And in difficult times, it's particularly important. Friends multiply joy and they divide sorrow. Friends sustain you and they shape you. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Every friend you have waters some aspects of your character, while other parts of your character wither. In a very real sense, you become like who you befriend. And you cannot do all that God has created you to do. You cannot be all that God has created you to be in this life without great friendships. So what do we learn from Jonathan and David? The first thing we learn is that great friends encourage your strengths and shield your weaknesses. Friendships can't be forced. They have to be found. They can't be demanded. They have to be discovered. You share an interest or a passion. You admire something you see in them. And that's what happens with Jonathan and David. They share this passion for God and his people. And they also share this skill, this kind of calling as warriors of their time. And David had just won a great battle when they met, but Jonathan was actually also one of the great warriors of his generation. And you might think that when you have two people who are both outstanding in the same sphere, that when they come together, they would end up competing, trying to outdo each other, undermining each other. But actually, this remarkable bond forms. And then Jonathan gives David these gifts, and they're laced with significance. He gives him a sword, his own sword to David. And that's kind of a way of encouraging David as a warrior, recognizing that he has this skill and encouraging him in it. He gives him a bow, which is his most valued possession. A huge honor, letting everyone know the esteem in which he held him. And a great friend will not just see your strengths, but they will encourage you to use your strengths more, to grow in your giftings. And they're secure enough to praise you to others. They don't fear that if you do well, it's going to make them look bad. They don't think that if your light shines brightly, it will make their light shine any less brightly. So they actually encourage you to shine your light, to do what you've been called to do. And it's because they actually see, in a sense, that they're so close to you, that as your light shines, you see wins. They actually share a part of that as well. So great friends encourage you in your strengths, but also great friends shield you from your weaknesses. So Jonathan's not naive about David and his weaknesses. He knows he's come from the fields, shepherd boy. He spent a bit of time in the royal palace, but now he's being kind of adopted to live there. And so what he does, it's remarkable really, he clothes him with the robe of a prince. He gives him the significance of a prince. And he does it in such a way that everyone would know how much he valued David and how much he saw David as being entirely right to be in the royal court. There's lots of people in life who want to expose your weaknesses and take advantage of them, but it takes a great friend to encourage you in your strengths and yet to shield your weaknesses. What does that look like? Well, when I was 17, I started getting involved with the church, which was on the estate near where we grew up, across the road from the school I went to. And there was a guy there I became really great friends with who was a couple of years older than me. And he thought he saw some kind of speaking gift in me. And so he was really encouraging me to speak at church. I was a bit nervous about this. I didn't really know how you would do that. I didn't know what the rules were. Didn't know how you were supposed to do it. So I was kind of resisting it. But he was so encouraging that eventually I found myself 16 or 17 years old standing in front of this church speaking. And I was so nervous, I was pretty sure no one was paying attention. And then after about a third of the way through my talk, it was like suddenly everyone was completely captivated by what I was saying. It's like a stillness fell on the church. And I felt almost as if they were hanging on my every single word. So after the talk, I went up to my friend and I said, that was exciting. I think you might be right. I think I might have some kind of gift. And he was like, yeah, well done, Steve. I'll give you some feedback, but well done. That was really good. And I was saying, but seriously, I almost felt like they were hanging on my every word. My friend said, yeah, I think they probably were. And I said, yeah, but it was quite exciting. He said, yeah. He said, Steve, do you realize you swore during your talk? I said, what? He said, well, it's just, I've never heard anyone swear, ever, while they've been giving a sermon in church before. And you swore during your talk. And I was mortified. I said, what did I say? And he said, you said, don't worry, I'm not going to do it again. And I said, oh no, that's terrible. It's going to be my first and last time I'll ever speak. And he said, don't worry about it. I thought it was great. It was real. It was authentic. It got people interested in what you were saying. And so he just kind of encouraged me. And actually looking back now, I didn't realize at the time, but he also really shielded me. Because knowing churches a little bit, I imagine he might have had a couple of emails on the Monday morning from people who were a little bit concerned about the particular word I'd said. But I didn't have any of that at the time. At the time, I just felt him encouraging me and shielding me. Great friends encourage you in your strengths and shield your weaknesses. But secondly, a great friend is also steadfast in the storm. Jonathan meets David as he's on the upward curve, at the height of his fame, his success. He's just won a great victory. He's being thrown adulation and honors and favor. And there are moments in life where it feels like maybe everyone wants to be your friend. People are coming close to you. People are gathering around you. And it can be hard to tell, are these people coming close to me because they're for me, or just because they're for the things I'm doing? Does this person want to be with me, or do they just like the idea of being where I am? It's really hard to tell the difference. But quite quickly, it all starts to go very wrong. Saul sees David as a threat. He gets jealous of him. And David not only falls out of favor with Saul, he falls into great danger. Saul tries to kill him 6 times, and it kind of graduates from quite cunning, indirect attempts to just full-on direct assassination attempts. Success breeds many companions, but failure filters your friends. Failure filters your friends. Some people, when you're down, will start to keep their distance. It's almost as if they don't want to be tainted by your trouble, as if they can't quite bear the cost of standing with you in your storm. They don't like the idea of that struggle. But there is a friend, the scripture says, that sticks closer than even a brother or a sister, who when everyone else backs away will come close, who will stand by you when others stand far off. A great friend walks in when the rest of the world walks out. And actually, the trials of life test your friendships. They will either make or break your friendships. They reveal the foundation of your friendships. The storms of your life reveal your vulnerabilities in a way that few other things will. And vulnerability is so key to connection. We're often wary of showing our vulnerability because we think we connect with people through our strengths. You impress people with your strengths, but you actually connect with them through your vulnerabilities. And storms reveal vulnerabilities. And I find it quite interesting reading this passage that we've just read. 2 great warriors of their generation coming together and just weeping with each other, kissing each other. And we're so wary of showing vulnerability. But I was speaking this week to 2 of my friends who have both led units for the army in battle, in wars. And they were saying vulnerability is so key to the trust you place in the people on your right and your left. They have to trust you. You have to trust them. And as much as they try to simulate that in training, they can't, because there's nothing quite like the reality of a battle, the reality of a storm, for revealing those things and forcing you to show your vulnerabilities. But the funny thing is, vulnerability breeds trust. It enables people to connect with you. So connection is key if you're going to be steadfast in the storms, but also commitment is key. And they're bound together, David and Jonathan, not just by their connection, but also by their commitment. They make this promise to each other, this covenant with each other, that they will be there for each other no matter what happens. And we don't really have the idea of covenant in friendship anymore. We have covenant in marriage. We have covenant in some commercial arrangements, but covenant in friendship seems a bit much. You probably can't imagine going for a drink with a friend in an evening and sitting across the table from them and saying, I just want to do life with you. We've only just met, but I'd like you to bind yourself to me in covenant loyalty for all of our days. It's probably not going to work out. Poor person just wanted a drink. You can't force friendship. But once you've found a friend, a great friendship has to be forged. It won't happen by accident. You have to invest commitment. And what does that look like? Well, this is a standard bell curve, which lots of you will be familiar. And if we say up here the kind of strength of a friendship, and if we say down here the time a friendship lasts for, what you tend to happen with all relationships, but particularly friendships as well, is that as you get to know someone, because people tend to lead with their strengths, and you see those first, their admirable qualities, you think, I really like this person's great, I really want to be their friend, they're amazing. And then as time goes on, as you become closer to them, you normally hit a bit of a bump in the road. And that might be just that you see enough about them that you realize this person isn't perfect. There's some parts about their character maybe I don't quite like so much. Maybe you saw the way they spoke to someone, you weren't sure about it. And then you've got a decision, do I just back off over time? let that start a new friendship, back away from it. Or it might be that there's a particular incident, a particular crisis that drives this moment. And you've got that decision, well, this is all getting a bit complicated, it's a bit too much like hard work, should I just back off? The only thing that will sustain your connection in a moment of storm is commitment. That is the thing that enables your strength to grow over time. You need both connection and commitment in friendships. Connection enables commitment, but commitment sustains connection. Your great friends are steadfast in the storm, but a great storm also reveals who your friends really are. So that's the second thing. But then thirdly, a great friend also speaks truth to your soul. I don't know if you noticed, it's remarkable the way Jonathan and David kind of speak to each other. There's this unhindered, open, unguarded communication. David says to Jonathan, your dad is trying to kill me. If I've done something wrong, why don't you just kill me? Jonathan says to David, never. If my dad's trying to kill you, I would let you know. I confess I've never had a conversation with a friend quite like that. But there's something about that friendship that shows the value of just really frank, honest conversation. A great friend will tell you what they think, and you can actually think out loud with a great friend. And David is telling Jonathan actually what he doesn't want to hear. The facts are there, but Jonathan doesn't want to see them. He doesn't want to know this father is this kind of plotting, murderous king. But he needs to know it. He needs to hear it. And the truth is, if you are going to fulfill your calling in life, you need people around you who are going to tell you things you don't want to hear. The scriptures say, as iron sharpens iron, one friend sharpens another. And that's not that's not a comfortable process. We all have blind spots. But the thing about blind spots is you can't see they're there. And if you don't have a friend who loves you enough to tell you they're there, you're going to keep crashing into other people. Proverbs says that the faithful are the wounds of a friend, but many are the kisses of an enemy. You need some people in your life who you trust enough to wound you from time to time. You need some people like that. And the thing is, wounds from a friend, they still hurt. Sometimes they hurt even more. But faithful wounds from a friend, though they feel cruel, are actually kind. Kisses from an enemy, though they feel kind, are actually cruel. When I started working as a barrister, you have this year-long job interview, and there are 10 of you vying for one place at the chambers, and it's a little bit like a year-long Apprentice meets the Hunger Games. That's the only way I can think of describing it. And on the first day, I kind of went to court really excited to meet the person who's going to be training me and was basically going to be my boss for this year. And I turned up at the court, I went into the room, I met him, it was where all the barristers get changed, there were 20 people standing around, and I'd already thought, it's a first day, you need to wear a tie, so I kind of put my tie on, and I thought that kind of looks okay, and I walked into the room, and he looked up at me, and he said, "You look like a footballer." And I was like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? He said, you're not supposed to look like a footballer, you're supposed to look like a barrister. And then he said, who taught you to tie a tie? And I thought, that is a really good question. I think it's me. And he literally grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into the loos. And he grabbed my tie and he yanked it up around my neck so tight I thought I was going to pass out. And then pulled it like this, and again, and again. And then he said, I think that'll do for today. And I was like so embarrassed. I was like, I don't believe this, in front of everyone. This is not how I thought my first day would go. My boss actually tying my own tie for me in front of everyone. But the thing was, it felt actually quite cruel. But he saw me, and straight away he realized I was a little bit out of my depth, and I needed some help. And he was going to walk that journey with me. And it felt hard, it felt cruel, but actually he was being incredibly kind to me. Now you might say, wait a minute, well, that's just a tie. But what about when your friend tells you something, your best friend tells you something you really don't want to hear? A few years ago, when my best friend said to me, Steve, you're really driven, and it's okay to be driven, but you need to know what's driving you. And I don't think you have the slightest idea what's driving you. And I came away and I was furious. I was like, who does he think he is? He doesn't know me that well. He doesn't know how difficult my life is. Who is he to judge me? And then I realized, actually, he wasn't saying it to hurt me. He was saying it to help me. It's so important. When a surgeon cuts, it looks harsh. But actually, it's not to hurt. It's to heal. And I wonder if you can do that with a friend. Some of you are like, the idea of that completely terrifies me. Some of you are like, I've got an 8-point list. I'm ready to go. But it's one of the hardest things in the world, actually, to speak truth to a friend and to do it in a loving way. Can they trust you? And then finally, a great friend sacrifices their self-interest. One of the reasons this story has captivated people right across the world for 3,000 years is that it seems like Jonathan and David should have been great rivals. They should have been enemies. They were rivals for the throne. Jonathan was the son of the king. In human eyes, he's the successor to the throne. He's been prepared for it every day of his life. David is anointed by God to be the next king. And Jonathan, in spite of his right of succession, prefers David. And he sees that God has anointed him, backs him to the hilt, even at the risk of his own life. He actually challenges the king over his treatment of David, comes toe-to-toe with him. And Saul is furious because he wants Jonathan to wipe David out, to seize the kingdom. But Jonathan isn't having any of it. He doesn't want to disobey God or dishonor his friend. So he sacrifices his interests for his friend. And actually, that takes great faith. It's easy to commend it in principle, to celebrate it from afar. But when you've actually got skin in the game, that is one of the hardest things you will ever have to do. When it's your self-interest that is at stake, can you sacrifice it? Can you stay faithful? And it takes great faith because it takes faith. There's something more significant, more valuable, more precious than power or position. And it's quite different from sometimes the way we think about things in our world today, because often we view everything, kind of in individualistic consumer culture, we view everything through a kind of cost-benefit ratio. Is this friendship good for me? Am I going to get more out of it than I put into it? What's my return on my investment in this friendship? Is this person useful to me or not useful? Lots of people are asking those questions the whole time, but there is a friend who is interested in you not for what you can do for them, but for you. And one of the tests of that is like Jonathan, they're prepared to sacrifice their self-interest for you and even to put themselves in harm's way for you. One of my best friends also happens to be my little brother, Paul. And you're actually allowed to be friends with members of your family. I don't know if you knew that, but it's okay. And we grew up in the same area, went to the same quite rough school. And I went off to study law and, trained and worked there and earned some money there. And he stayed, actually, in our area on the estate. And he did his own form of training, learned how to make quite a lot of money, actually, without being in any kind of lawful employment. And as part of that, he learned a number of skills. He learned how to handle himself, how to defend his turf, all the usual life skills, how to fight. And we actually share two great passions. One is our faith, and the other is a passion for Luton Town Football Club, which is where we grew up. And Luton Town, as you know, one of the most prestigious clubs in our country. And we used to go to the games quite a lot, and they got to the final of, wait for it, the Johnson's Paint Trophy, which, as silverware goes, that's almost as big as it gets. And in the final, they were facing off against Scunthorpe United. So it was kind of the two great towns of England competing in this final. We were quite excited about it. We went along together. And then, although the game was great, within about 10 minutes, this fight broke out at our end of the ground. And actually, it was only about 5 meters away. And the strange thing was, it was actually Luton fans fighting Luton fans, which is just crazy. I mean, all violence is crazy, but that was particularly crazy. And as fights sometimes do, it started to grow and it started to come more towards us. And I was kind of readying myself, thinking, well, I'm going to have to defend myself. I suppose with hindsight, I could have walked away, but it was quick. And, and just as it was coming close, my little brother Paul, I was on the end of the row, he was on the next seat, kind of stepped past me and went to step in front of me. And I said to him, Paul, what are you doing? And he said, so you're a barrister and you're going to train to be a vicar. I'll deal with this. So, kind of makes sense. I mean, he's always had a way with words, Paul. And he literally stood in between me and this fight. And the strange thing was, it's slightly the way Paul carries himself, slightly the way he looks. He's always been a bit of a peacekeeper in the sense that when he joins fights, they tend to end quite quickly. And as he stepped forward, it seemed to have quite a calming effect on everyone else. And actually, within a couple of seconds, everyone just stopped fighting and sat down, which was remarkable to see. But I was thinking about it afterwards. I was thinking, actually, what Paul was saying was, in his own particular way, he was saying, if you want to come at Steve, you're going to have to come through me. And that's actually what Jonathan is saying to Saul. If you want to come at David, you're going to have to come through me. You need people in your life who are not just going to stand by as evil rages against you, but are prepared to climb in the trenches with you and even to put your interest before their own, to sacrifice their comfort, their convenience in order to help you, who actually stand in between you and your enemies, in between you and evil, in between you and harm. You need people like that. So what are you going to do with these 4 keys to friendship? And one of the things you could do, you can consider each of your friends, mark them under each of the 4 categories out of 10, send them a little text, tot it up. This is your score out of 40. Kiss. You could do that. Or you could think, well, actually, the best way to develop great friendships is to be a great friend. So you could use them to analyze your own behavior. So this is how I'm doing. But I think all of us would say that over life, these are actually harder to do than they look. We can all probably think of one that we've failed in. Where do you find the power? Where do you find the resources? Where do you find the strength to live like this, to be this sort of friend? Now, as they part, Jonathan says to David, may the Lord be between us forever. May the Lord be between us, linking us, connecting us, supporting us, bridging us, being a bond between us. I mean, what if you already had a great friend like this, whose friendship was so strong, so committed, so truthful, so selfless, that you couldn't help but be transformed by them? As they befriended you, you became more like them. And it actually overflowed into all your other friendships. Jonathan, though he was born royal, didn't consider the throne something to be grasped. He was happy to take the form of a servant, serving his friend David. He was happy to humble himself, even be obedient at the risk of his life. Who does that remind you of? Jesus, though he was of the same nature with God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but took the form of a servant, humbling himself, and was obedient even to death on a cross for you, for me. I wonder if you dare to believe that today, that you can find friendship in Jesus, that Jesus sees you exactly as you are, all of your strengths, all of your weaknesses. He knows you to the bottom of your soul, yet he loves you to the sky, who by his Spirit gives strength even to your witness. Jesus, who is committed to you, who by his blood established a new covenant, which is unbreakable, so that you can have confidence that nothing, no evil, no harm, no suffering, no challenge, no enemy, not even death can separate you from his love. Jesus, who loves you just as you are, but also sees all you can become and wants to shape you by his word and by his Spirit to transform you. Jesus, who has demonstrated that he's willing to sacrifice everything for you, to stand in harm's way for you, to pay the price for you, to bear the burden for you, to count the cost for you, because he wants to know you as a friend. And just think what's possible as you are transformed by that friendship, as it filters out into all your relationships, into your other friendships. Think about the impact those friendships could have, healing, helping this broken and hurting world, being set free to love without fear of rejection, to trust without fear of betrayal, to risk without the fear of failure, to forge great friendships which transform this church, this city, and our nation. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm Bear Grylls. My favourite way to start the day, the Bible in 1 year. That's how wild I am.
Find out more at BibleIn1year.org or download the Bible in 1 Year app.